And welcome into Poke the Bear episode 329, presented by CLNS Media. Make sure you go subscribe to the Bruins Ringside YouTube channel for all your Bruins content needs. There's Conor, we got Poke the Bear, Bruins Beat, Pucks with Haggs, 6 times throughout the week. Not each, of course. 6 total podcasts throughout the week. Interviews and insight. There'll be live streams throughout the offseason at different inflection points, different big things happening. And make sure to put on notifications. And if you listen, if you like us just via audio and you don't want to see us, okay, that's fine. I won't take too much offense. Make sure to subscribe to us over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That is Conor Ryan. Conor, what is up?
Evan, doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. It's a weird time, not a lot Bruins wise, not much going on. We're just gonna sit here and maybe we'll review movies this episode. Maybe we'll do that.
Let's start with Ocean's 11. I myself find it to be. Well, I guess we have to talk about. All right, bye everyone. See you guys.
We'll see you next time. There's, it's funny because NHL playoffs are going on. We'll get to that in a little bit because there are some implications for the Bruins. But the head coaching search seems to be something that's been in the news quite a bit. Rick Tocchet was someone the Bruins were linked to. I will say, though, Conor, it's interesting that you haven't heard much about the Bruins with any coaches. Tocchet's really the only one. Jay Woodcroft's name has popped up in recent days, but nothing concrete, nothing set. It makes me think, Conor, I think it's because their next head coach is coaching in the playoffs right now.
Yeah, we've heard a few things, right? We've heard them being linked to Rick Tocchet, who goes to Philly. Again, I like Rick Tocchet. I think, especially if you're talking about like the retread kind of older coaches, I think he's probably has the highest ceiling there. But also, I'm glad the Bruins aren't the team to give him one of the richest contracts in NHL history for a head coach, right? I don't know how much he's going to be the guy that completely turns things around for a team like the Bruins. Frank Saravalli, Daily Faceoff, mentioned on Wednesday morning that he views Woodcroft as a leading candidate, as someone to keep tabs on with the Bruins. So that is an interesting little nugget there. And I think we'll probably talk a little bit more about Woodcroft today because we haven't done too much on him so far as we go through the rest of our coaching candidates. But no, the fact that you really haven't heard like a lot of major rumblings, I guess, in terms of who the Bruins are prioritizing, who they like, what they're, assessing this offseason. Yeah, maybe it does, give credence to what you said, Evan, where, they're still, looking through, seeing who's out there, and maybe more importantly, waiting things out to see if maybe in a couple of weeks, if, someone like Mitch Love, who his season with the Capitals could be over pretty early, pretty soon, or if we're waiting a little bit longer, if it's a guy like Donskov, usually the coaching carousel, there's a lot of different guys out there, and usually it moves pretty quick once kind of the first domino falls, which you kind of saw with Mike Sullivan going to New York. But it does seem like the Bruins are kind of being patient, which, again, remains to be seen who they target, who they end up hiring, who takes the job. But at least it does seem like they are taking their time, assessing all their options, and maybe, again, waiting things out for a guy that is still pretty tied up right now, which I think is encouraging. At least like they're not rushing into these things where, again, who they hire is going to set the tone, not just for this season, right? But also I think it maps out or it gives you a little bit of a reading the tea leaves, right, of what this team, what this ownership is envisioning moving forward. If it's a younger guy, maybe it's, hey, we're going to grow with this team, maybe be a little bit more patient and see where that takes us, hopefully to get a higher ceiling down the road. So we will see. So the waiting game continues.
Yeah, Woodcroft's interesting because he's been linked to the Bruins recently, and I keep going back to he's a free agent. If they wanted Woodcroft that bad, they'd have him by now, or they would be hearing a lot more about it. And they still could. I mean, again, I think they are dead set on, I think Misha Donskov, Mitch Love. Both those guys are still in the thick of the playoffs. So maybe they want to wait for that. I mean, I would also say there are other teams who need head coaches, the Penguins, the Kraken, who you infamously love. Chicago still needs a head coach. There are other jobs out there. Makes me wonder, are they doing the same things? Are they waiting for Misha Donskov to become available, or Mitch Love, or other assistants that are still coaching? Woodcroft's interesting, though. Woodcroft, I'll go through his resume. Video coach of the Detroit Red Wings for 3 years from '05 to '08. Assistant coach of the San Jose Sharks from '08 to 2015. He was the assistant coach for the Edmonton Oilers from 2015 to 2018. He was the head coach of the Bakersfield Condors in the AHL from 18 to 22. And then he was promoted to head coach of the Edmonton Oilers mid 21-22. Was the head coach there in 22-23. And then was let go shortly into 23-24, which was last year when they started off. I think they were like 3-9, and they ended up
3-9-1.
Yeah, they ended up going to the Stanley Cup final. I think this is an interesting thing because Woodcroft is young, 48 from Toronto. His only head coaching opportunity in the NHL was that Edmonton job, and it's interesting because I think we view a lot of it's sort of like how we view draft picks. Before they play or before you actually make the pick, they're very, they're not gaudy, but like they're more enticing. Once you see them and once you see them play, it's like, their value's been tanked a little bit. And Woodcroft's coached in the NHL, which is something that Misha Donskov can't say, Mitch Love can't say, Marco Sturm can't say. But I look at those other guys a little more favorably because I guess maybe the thing is fresh. Whereas with Woodcroft, you have sort of a resume in the NHL to go off of, and it wasn't that long ago. What do you think about Woodcroft?
Yeah, he's kind of he's definitely intriguing, right? And I almost maybe put him higher than like the other guys who have previously held the job. Like I wouldn't call him like a retread, right?
No, I wouldn't either.
Like he's had one full season technically, right? As a head coach, and they got 109 points. I wonder if like the lack of enthusiasm with a guy like Woodcroft, who again, you look at the results, right? Like as you said, he's worked in video before with Detroit, so he's kind of has that same background of scouting, those kind of things. Kind of what Donskov had, like in terms of his early, like his road to being an NHL coach was kind of the similar trajectory. Was part of some really, really good San Jose teams for a long time. Like when you see that he worked with the Sharks, I feel like your first instinct is like, oh, but then you realize like, oh, they were a wagon from 08 to 15. So we're part of a successful franchise there. Obviously stuck around for quite a bit. The Oilers weren't all that great for a large stretch when he first got there, but had experience as a head coach in the AHL, had some really successful teams down there. And then, like his first year as an interim helps lead them to the the Western Conference Finals, lose to a wagon of an Avalanche team. What are you going to do there? Then first, only full year, gets again 50 wins, 109 points, loses in the second round to the team that wins the cup again in Vegas, and then just can't get out of a rut to start the year, right? And gets fired. So like I feel like he's still a guy who has a pretty high stock. He hasn't coached since then, but I read something that he was talking on Daily Faceoff saying that he pretty much has spent the whole year traveling, like learning from other hockey coaches across the world. He's like Batman when he joins the League of Shadows. He's at like a monastery somewhere, just like trying to learn the breakout. Like ninjas just beating the shit out of him as he's trying to solve. They're trying to solve Guy Boucher's neutral zone trap as he's like some guys are just punching him in the chest
with a samurai sword.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm very curious if he gets hired by the Bruins. I want to hear actually where he was. He's probably just in like Prague, just chilling. Like that's probably what it actually was. But I just imagine him just like training with Liam Neeson on like a frozen lake somewhere.
Yes.
But no, like he's.
Lights the whole place. Didn't Batman light the whole place on
he does.
fire?
He's kind of a dick. They train him and he blows everything up. They were kind of being jerks too. But again, we said this wasn't going to be a movie podcast. But no, like I like Woodcroft. I think as you said, there's probably more appeal with the prospects, right? Where you don't know what exactly you have. But I think Woodcroft, like what he's shown so far, is a younger coach who's got good results. I wonder if it has to do with the fact that you're like the coach of the Oilers. And I feel like everyone, it's same with like Knobloch right now with the Oilers, where like the results have been great. How much of it is also like you got two of the three best players in the world? And and that's not to say that like I think like that is the only reason why you're good, right? Like I think Joe Torre was a great manager, even though he had wagon Yankees
right.
team from like
Jeter, A-Rod.
like is like Scotty Bowman a bad coach because he's had like unreal team? Is Phil Jackson a bad coach because he had Michael Jordan and then Kobe and Shaq? So again,
Phil Jackson, Joe Torre.
Yes, exactly.
Woodcroft.
Yes,
Woodcroft.
exactly. That is pretty much how we're going through things now. Don't clip this, Evan. But
by the way, not Todd Woodcroft. Jay Woodcroft. There's a big difference.
But I do wonder if that also plays into it. Is like, it's one thing to do it and have those really good results with those kinds of players. What happens when it's Elias Lindholm and Casey Middlestat are your 1-2 down the middle and not McDavid and Draisaitl? And it's not to say that I think that Woodcroft that immediately gets exposed, like a guy who's was a rising through the ranks, has a good track record kind of wherever he's gone, has a year to kind of study and learn from his mistakes and what he can do better. And again, it's not like this is a guy who's like 60. Like, I think he's still a young coach that has a lot of upside. So I know it's immediately like once those reports started coming out on Tuesday and Wednesday, people were like, no, absolutely not. It's like, no, like, is he the top of my list? Like, I still am probably intrigued by the prospects, I would probably say. But like, if Woodcroft is the guy that, when compared to those younger, unproven coaches, makes the most compelling argument, I'm also not necessarily going to begrudge them for going in that option as opposed to a Laviolette or a Gallant or something like that.
Yeah, I would absolutely not put Jay Woodcroft in the Laviolette, Gallant, Tortorella camp. I mean, that's just not. I mean, Woodcroft is borderline a prospect. It's sort of like Matt Poitras coming up for a little bit, and then going back down. I mean, he's still technically a prospect.
The Bruins are hoping that Woodcroft is like Gustav Forsling, like doesn't get qualified and then becomes like a beast somewhere else.
Yes. I'd be okay with it. I'd be fine with it. It's not a flashy name. It's not a name I'm like overly excited about. I would prefer that over Laviolette or a Tortorella. I still put Donskov ahead of him. I probably put Marco Sturm as well. Mitch Love is intriguing. It's harder to say with that. There was another one. Was it Todd Nelson?
Todd Nelson, yeah, the Hershey head coach.
I like him. Hershey's been really good the last bunch of years. So like, I put Woodcroft, I'd be okay with it. It wouldn't be my favorite. It wouldn't be my first choice. And I don't think it's the Bruins' first choice either. I keep going back to like, they could, if they really wanted Woodcroft right now, they could just get him because he's a free agent. And I assume he's probably talking to different teams, but like, there hasn't been a ton of like outside of Tocchet and Sullivan, there hasn't been a ton of like head coaching news of late, or at least hasn't felt like, there's Joel Quenneville as well. But Woodcroft, he's in probably in my like top 5, but he's like 5. So not like dying for him, but if that's the guy, as you said, if that's the compelling argument, okay, I would still rather go in the Donskov direction. I would still rather go in the Marco Sturm direction. Sturm's interesting. I wonder with Sturm, like Zdeno Chara has his spot in the organization, and those two played together, and I assume they liked each other quite a bit. I wonder how much of a voice Chara gets on the next head coach, and if Sturm kind of, if that plays a part in it, where he's like, no, I played with him, I really like him, I trust him. Like, I wonder how much voice Chara gets, because we still don't really know exactly what Chara does, but he is around, and I just wonder if he has any impact on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's those ties there, and it's the same thing. I feel like a lot of the coaching candidates they can look at, there are ties to however you want to look at it. Like, I'm sure Chara, has those connections with someone like Sturm, who again has a really good track record kind of wherever he's gone as well. So you factor that in, but it's the same thing with Donskov, right? Where it's almost like you put the pieces together, as you said, of like, why, if the Bruins really, really like Woodcroft, let's say he's already interviewed and they like what they have, why haven't they pounced on it when there's a lot of other teams that are probably interested in him as well? You do wonder if it is you're just waiting things out for a guy like Donskov. And again, I feel like we always mention him a lot because I think we both really like the potential. We really like the track record. We like the experience he's had in other areas of hockey in terms of, pre-scouting, developing, those kinds of things. But also, like, Don Sweeney added him to Team Canada's staff in 4 Nations. Like, there's an evident link there as to why that he's pretty fond of the of the coach in terms of what he could be. And also he was in the mix a couple of years ago when they were eventually hired Jim Montgomery. So they clearly like him. They clearly know about him. There's like clear connections there. And I think you make the same argument with a guy like Sturm, who also like is free to sign now if they wanted to as well. So it does make you wonder if I think they like, people like Sturm, they like Woodcroft, but you do wonder if it's like, all right, like, no, we'll get back to you. And they're waiting for the other shoe to drop to see if Donskov or Love or someone like that, how viable they are as candidates. Would they accept the job? Are they ready for it? And I think once they get that answer, that's when they then move and decide on who amongst this pool of candidates is who they go and target to be their next head coach.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, like going back to Woodcroft, there is the element, and we said this when Joe Sacco got promoted, where like, he's been head coach before and he wasn't successful, so that means he's going to be terrible the rest of, being a head coach. It's not true. You learn a lot. And Jay Woodcroft, ever since he got let go by the Oilers early in 2023, has, as you said, been kind of going around
traversing the world.
Being Bruce Wayne. So like, you can learn a lot from that, and you can learn a lot from your first stop and your first experience. And I think most people learn from their first job. So like, there is that element too with Woodcroft, where I don't want to make it seem like, oh my God, don't hire this guy. It's just, I do think there are more intriguing candidates out there. And I think the Bruins are aiming towards those guys because, again, if they wanted Woodcroft, I think they probably already have him. Before we get into stuff coming from the NHL playoffs, Connor, I want to remind everybody to go subscribe to Bruins Ringside on YouTube. There will be podcasts throughout the off season all the time. Poke the Bear, Bruins Beat, Pucks with Haggs, live streams. Turn on notifications to make sure that you know when a video is dropped or when we're actually going live, and you can join in and chat with us and see what we're saying. And then again, if you don't love the looks of us, you can just listen via audio.
Correct.
And Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the whole 9 yards. Make sure to subscribe over there to get everything delivered straight to your phone in the morning. Playoff-wise, Panthers are 1 game away from moving to the conference final for the 3rd straight year. Which, like, again, I go back to something I tweeted last week when Marchand was giving Nosek, like, the game puck. I was like, man, like, I just woke up. Like, went to bed on April 29th, 2023. I just woke up. What happened? What's this? Remarkable. I still can't believe that I can believe it given the success and the roster they have, but I just think if someone went back and told us in 2023 that this is what would happen, would be like, yeah, all right, like, calm down there, buddy. Like, what are you smoking?
A whole bunch of former Bruins on that team, though. You got Boquist scoring a goal, AJ Greer scoring a goal.
Greer, yeah, it's a heck of a team. So there's good and bad in this. The good is that you are close to a 2027 first round pick, which would be very nice because of the Marchand trade. I think it is 2027, right? Or
it can move to it's 2027, but I believe it can move to 2028. But I keep on forgetting what the actual detail is that would change it. But I do believe the most likely scenario is it's 2027.
Okay, so but and Marchand has to play like over half their games, and they have to make it to the conference final, which they're 1 game away from, and Marchand's played in every single game. So looks like
unless they make the conference finals, and then like Marchand like goes fishing and like a hook gets him in the foot or something, and he can't play, then like he's going there. They'll get the first pick. Like they'll get a first round pick, not the first overall pick. Unless the Panthers really suck in a couple of years. So
they're picking Carter Meyer in 2027 first overall.
Hell yeah.
But so that's the good. The not so great, but not as bad is Mitch Marner has that turnover on Wednesday night, which doesn't look all that great. And so now you have people being like, oh, Mitch Marner sucks, blah, blah, blah. Leafs are blowing it again, up 2-0 in the series, now down 3-2. Does this series concern you at all about Marner in terms of wanting to sign him, or are you unwavered?
I'm unwavered. I know that's not going to be
possible. I've seen a lot.
I've got a lot of. I had someone tweet at me, and it was like tag both you and me in a tweet. It's like it's these two idiots leading the crusade. And I was like, correct.
Damn right, it is us idiots. You're 100% correct.
I mean, listen, has it been the best playoffs for Marner? No. But I mean, he also gave them the lead in game 2, gave them the lead in game 3, and then they blew it. You know, it was the same. It was the same game where Rantanen had his second hat trick. And again, like you look at Rantanen compared to Marner, right? And Rantanen is I think showing proof of when you add elite talent, how much that can elevate your entire team during the playoffs. And then you compare it with, I think I saw it was a tweet of like Rantanen has more goals through what 8 games with Dallas than Marner has had playoff goals in his entire 6-year new contract with Toronto, which is not great, right? I still think that he's been able to generate offense. He's still like a guy that if you're the Bruins and you're so, you know, bereft of talent, I still think that's the guy you need. Like you just need a superstar level player that can keep you in the fight, can elevate the rest of your line mates. And again, like, is he going to be the de facto guy? I think for what the Bruins need, it's just someone that can drive play on his own line. If you have David Pastrnak and Marner on separate lines, you have 2 functioning top 6 lines just there. We're not even looking at who they add the rest of the way. And so has he been like a elite player performer? No, I'm not going to say that of like, well, if you look at the underlying numbers, they're not great for a guy that good. Same with a guy like Matthews. Does that mean like I wouldn't want Austin Matthews? No, I would want the 60 goal Selke, potential centerman like Austin Matthews who's available. I just think if you're a team like the Bruins and a guy like Marner is available, you have to make every effort to add a player like that, because it's just what has hampered this team for years now. Not even looking at this year where this team was just, the lineup was so barren, you didn't have a lot of elite talent, but even in years past where they've gotten to the playoffs, like what has usually been their Achilles heel has been like just the lack of that next star player, that next, offensive boost that puts you over the top. And I think a guy like Marner, if you sign him as the cap jumps up, even if it is a hefty paycheck, he's going to be a guy that is going to anchor your first line, second line, wherever he is for the length of that contract. And then once you add in whoever you have with the number 7 pick, whoever else you add in the years ahead, I think that's a guy that if you are trying to build a sustainable contention window, a guy like him fits into that equation. So it's not perfect, which again, there's very few times in which a bona fide franchise superstar is even available in free agency. But I think if you are the Bruins and you're that short on talent, I still think you throw the bag at a guy like Mitch Marner.
He is a bona fide franchise superstar. I think that's the thing is like, I mean, again, and like, I will go to some underlying numbers to support my argument. I mean, again, he's the top 5-on-5 goals against per 60 player in the last 5 postseasons. So he's great defensively. I know everybody sees the spinorama turnover on Wednesday night. It doesn't show the whole picture.
Brad Marchand's also the most popular guy in Florida right now, and people don't want to look at 2019 Game 7. So everyone fucks up in hockey.
Yes, everybody messes up. It happens. That's why when people like David Pastrnak turns the puck over too much, and it's like, well, yeah, because he has the puck the most amount of the time. That happens. The more you have the puck on your stick, the more likely you are to turn the puck over.
Yeah, watch Nikita Kucherov in games 2 through whatever it was 5 against Florida. You don't want Nikita Kucherov? Yeah, you don't want. Yeah,
exactly. Marner's also 3rd in playoff assists this year. And he has 61 points in 68 total playoff games. I'm not saying that he has been a world beater in the playoffs. He's a setup man. I still take him. And a lot of it doesn't have to do with the playoffs. I mean, obviously you want playoff success. I think he balances your scoring a little bit more, being on the second line. You probably put them on the same power play, him and Pastrnak. You find a way to make that work. But like,
it's pretty damn good.
That's pretty damn good. Like you balance it out. So that helps with the playoffs. But the biggest thing is, the next 2 to 3 years, I keep saying, you need to be playoff contenders. Like that you don't want to waste David Pasternak's prime. Be in the hunt for the playoffs. Be in around it. If you're the 3rd team in the Atlantic, if you're a wild card team, and you're letting those prospects develop, you're making your picks. So when Jake O'Brien, who I think they're most likely to draft at 7, comes up in 2 to 3 years, he gets to play with Pastrnak or Marner. And maybe it's Dean Letourneau. Maybe it's a different center that they draft. Comes up. Will Zellers has played a lot of center. I'm just, naming prospects. Comes up and gets to play with Mitch Marner. Like, I think that's a really good thing. And that helps the next generation of players. And sure, is he incredible in the playoffs? No, he hasn't been. And he's historically lost in the playoffs. Those Leafs teams have been losers. But I take him. I take him for all the reasons I just listed. I think he can help you in the playoffs. I know it's not right to be like, well, I don't need him to win a cup in 2 to 3 years in the first couple of years of his contract. It would be nice, but that's not the main point. And I know people say, well, that's not the main point, then I don't want him. And it's like, but you're not a true cup contender right now. He gets you to be a playoff contender. You're in it. You're a part of it. You're competitive the whole year. You should be a tough out in the playoffs. But a Stanley Cup contender, you're going to need some higher end talent down the middle, and that's why you're drafting those guys. So again, to me, I go with Marner. I still have him as my top priority this offseason. And I don't think much is going to waver me from that. If anything, if the playoffs, if he stinks, if there's the narrative that he
sign him for $12.5 million,
for cheaper. Like, I'm fine with that. Are you kidding me? Okay, great. Suck. I know what he's like. So yeah, and look, I understand people are, oh, it's never going to happen. And we're not saying that we're not like, we are hearing that Mitch Marner, the Bruins are going to, definitely sign Mitch Marner. No, that's not it at all. It's saying he's a fit. They should 100% be making a compelling pitch to get Mitch Marner. No doubt. No doubt. And it would help if he was on the left side. Be nicer if he was a left wing, but he's not. He's right wing. So you make do with that. We'll talk more about him throughout the playoffs.
We got a ways to go.
We do have a ways to go. I don't want to waste all the ammo on that. Offer sheets. Elliot Friedman put out a story. It was more just kind of a graph of how offer sheets are going to work this offseason. I did like how the St. Louis Blues replied to that tweet because they got Broberg and
Holloway,
who actually had a phenomenal year.
Yeah, both of them great moves by St. Louis.
Yeah, chess. And I think like Ty Anderson wrote a story on Thursday morning for 98.5 the Sports Hub, kind of outlining some similar players like Matthew Knies, who we'll talk about in a second, is sort of the big fish to offer sheet. But there are a number of guys that are more realistic that you're not going to have to give up, a first, second, and a third for, who can give you value down in the lineup. Geeky obviously was not an offer sheet, but someone like that who maybe has a little bit of untapped potential or shown you some glimmers, but can maybe do some more. I think that's the more realistic route. To get Knies, you probably would have to do a first, second, and a third. I think at least. Because again, if you go higher than that, it's even more. What's it, 2 firsts or something like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're looking at, I think when people look at Matthew Knies, and like, I really like Matthew Knies. Good player, goes to the net, had almost a 30-goal season at 23 years old. A lot to like about him and what he can do moving forward. I think we all agree.
I'd love him in the lineup. Oh my God.
There's a lot to like about a guy who has the potential to be a 30-goal regular, like Morgan Geeky. No, I'm just kidding. But like, again, like,
yes, just like Morgan Geeky. Yes.
But, as much as I like Matthew Knies, people are like, all right, yeah, I'd give up, I'd sign him to, $7.5 million, which again, like when you look at his age plus the market value, okay, like that would make sense, right? So if you were to sign him, let's say $7.5 million on a long-term deal, you'd be giving up next year your first, second, and third round picks. A lot to give up for a guy. And again, you can make the case like, hey, if you think the Bruins are going to be back in the playoffs next year, then you give up your first, second, and third if it adds a guy that immediately becomes an impact player right now and builds with this group moving forward. If that's when you want to say, then go for it. I think if you really want like Matthew Knies, you're going to have to give him like over $9 million because other than that, I think you're just making the job easier for Toronto to set the price for him. It's the same thing with.
I go 7.5. We'll match that. Easy.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. No, sure. Buy Marner. Like, that's fine. Like, we thought you were going to be going for 9.5. We can't do that with Tavares, being a free agent and all these other things. But if you want to like actually put, Toronto in a tough spot and offer like over $9 million, if you offer RFA between $9.3 million to $11.7 million, you have to give up 2 firsts, 1 second, and 1 third to do it. And I think you're going to have to offer over 9 just to make it so that Toronto can't match that, right? Like you look at Edmonton with all the money they committed, especially with like Draisaitl's contract coming up. They literally just did not have any money to retain Broberg and Holloway. Like there's only so much you can do. If you're the Bruins and you offer 7.5, like, and you set the parameters, not even the parameters, you set the terms as to what the contract is, then they will sign him, keep their 23-year-old potential 30-goal scorer, and then work around it. If it's 9.5, then they can't, like, then it gets really tough, right? It's like, all right, do we really want to lose our guy? But that means we're really dismantling other parts of the lineup. We're really moving on from not just Marner, but a few other guys just to make the money work. And we're bringing a couple of league minimum guys. Do we want to risk that for a guy in Knies who, again, is really good, but, is he also a byproduct of who he's... There's a whole bunch of things that go into it, right? And I think the only way you cause those kinds of discussions and put the pressure on Toronto is you got to offer way and above what even his higher tier value would be on the market. And it's like, if you are going to offer $9 million plus for the guy, is a guy like Knies, a winger, worth 2 firsts and a second and a third? That's where you kind of run into that issue. And it's almost like, unless it is, a young centerman who's like ready to take a huge step forward and like is going to be a lock to be a legit like top 10 center in the league in a couple of years, I'm not sure if it's worth giving up that much draft capital on top of a really sizable contract for a player like that. And so that's why I wonder if instead of going after Knies, do you go with more reasonable terms, right? Where it's instead of that, you're signing like Will Cooley on the Rangers to, something where it's, $4 million and you give up just a second round pick and you put the Rangers in a tough spot and they can't match. Or a guy like Voronkov, who again is not going to be being paid $9 million, right? So I wonder if you have to be more selective, target guys who are already legit NHL players, have room to grow, but you're also not signing a guy above what his probably projected market value is and giving up a boatload of draft picks on top of it.
I think the Knies thing very much comes down to, is Matthew Knies worth a first round pick? Yes. Right? If you were going to make a first, you're hoping that you can get Matthew Knies. You start to get into like, the third round pick, fine, whatever. Okay, I'll give up a third for Matthew Knies. You get into like the second round, the other second round pick, and you get into the other first, and you're like, that's stretching it. Like I'm not saying that they're going to nail all those picks, but chances are they're going to get a guy or two out of those picks. Now, ideally, you hope Matthew Knies is, you're hoping you're picking a Matthew Knies impact player with your first round pick and your second round pick, your third round pick, or whatever, and you're hoping to get Knies for that. It's funny. So after we did Bruins beat, me and Court Lalonde, or earlier Thursday, we were talking about this. And he was making a case for Knies getting offer sheeted. And up until then, I'd been like, absolutely not. And then it was kind of a compelling case. And I was like, that's interesting. Like, it's a little bit cheaper, maybe frees up some money to sign someone else. But the more I think about it, like, I want to make those picks. Like if I can find a way to sign Mitch Marner, which is going to be hard because teams like Utah are going to fight for him. Chicago will probably be in on it. There'll be other teams who want him. But if I could do that and then make my picks, a team that needs to make picks so bad, if there's any team in the NHL that needs to make their picks, it's them. Now, Knies is 23. It's not like you're doing this for a 30-something-year-old. You're right in that it gets into that range of 2 firsts, a second, and a third. And that's a lot for a team who ranks in near the bottom or at the bottom in terms of prospect rankings. And I know you go, it's Knies is better than having prospects. I don't know if that's fully the case. Like you do need to make your picks. You do.
I also just think with that contract, again, if it's you're giving him $9.5 million, you give him the same contract as Charlie McAvoy. He's a 30-goal winger, and that he's a really good player. Is he like a franchise guy? Hell, like Morgan Geekie is a 30-goal winger playing with elite talent. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. Like, would you give Morgan Geekie, who's 26, he's only 3 years older than, again, I know everyone thinks Morgan Geekie's like 35. He's like 3 years older than Matthew Knies. Would you give Morgan Geekie $8.5 million deal and give up a first, second, and third if he was an RFA? No.
Nope. And it's funny because
Knies, I like Matthew Knies. I'm not shitting on him. I think he's a great player. And if the Bruins got him, he'd probably be a 30-goal guy for the next 5, 6, 7 years. He's really good. I just wouldn't give him that contract on top of what the draft capital is on top of whatever you're paying him. In terms of what the overall value is, I think I'd rather you go after a guy like Cooley and then still have the money freed up to add other players as opposed to putting all your eggs in one basket with a winger and Knies.
I mean, again, Knies' first full season was last year, 80 games, 15 goals, 35 points. This year, 78 games, 29 goals, 58 points. That's good. That's good stuff. Like a great
He's a
encouraging
really
start to a
good player.
career. But $9.5 million is a tough sell. That's a tough sell. And
I think
I also
that's
go
what
back
it
to,
has
like,
to
you need to
be.
make your picks. You need to
Yeah.
make your picks too. That's the other part of this. Like, you put yourself in this position, you got to make your picks. You've acquired picks. Like, and as I said, I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. Yes, you're hoping you're getting a Matthew Knies with a first, but you add in another first and a second and a third. Gets to be a lot. Gets to be a lot. What are
I
you
feel
doing?
like if you're like the Bruins, like you don't want to be like Sebastian Aho, where like Montreal was trying to get back at them for offer sheeting Kotkaniemi. So remember, like the
Yes.
next year when Aho was an RFA, Montreal gave him a contract that he accepted, and then Carolina's like, sure, you thanks for making our contract for us. Like, yeah, we
Yeah.
will sign to Aho. Thank you. Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to do that. So if the Bruins go to like Toronto and they're like, hey, we got 7.7 million from Matthew Knies.
With a
I
smiley
feel,
face.
yeah, the smiley face. Like they're gonna be like, okay, thank you.
Sure. No
If
problem.
it's 9 million, then it's like shit. Okay, like we'll call you right back, and then they like throw their clipboard against the wall. Like that's where it gets tougher. I think if you are trying to really put Toronto in a tough spot, you have to hit that 9 million payout to really get them to sweat. And I just don't know if the Bruins are going to be the team to do that.
I don't think they are either. Because again, so if they were at like 9.2, you only do have to do a first, second, and third because it comes down to the 9.3. But then it hits at what you said. Are you really comfortable giving him a $9.2 million contract? That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And yes, the cap's going up. Cap's going up without a doubt. And all likelihood, Matthew Knies is going to be a really good player in this league. Like, not saying he's not. That's just a lot of money to give to someone at that age with that kind of experience and that kind of production, which has been good, but he has also only really played with elite players. And I think that's a really important part of it. I go back to, like, I want to make my picks and I want my superstar player. Mitch Marner and draft picks. That's what I want. That's what I want. I keep going back to that.
I would do Marner and Will Cooley and giving up a second, one of your 2 seconds,
Yes.
like one of the seconds for it. I love Will Cooley. I think Will Cooley's at his worst is a impactful, kick-ass third line player who even could be more of like a legit middle six, like could move up more. Like he has more to give at 23 years old. That guy is someone that I think if you're looking for a team that also has no money in the Rangers, that should be a guy you look at because I think he's a guy that immediately makes your lineup better further down in the third line.
Someone else Ty mentioned Mason McTavish because the Ducks are in a weird spot where they have a ton of room, but they got to sign a lot of guys in the next couple of years because this is what happens when you rebuild and you have all these prospects come up at once. You got to pay them all. I mean, look at the Sharks, right? Like they get, let's say they get Misa, which is what I assume they're going to get. They're going to have to pay Celebrini, Smith, and Misa likely all within the same like 2 or 3 year window. That's going to be a lot of freaking money. I wonder about McTavish. That's a center. Has been a pretty good producer the last 2 years at least. Set career highs this past year. That's going to be a little bit more than a Will Cooley. But I do wonder if he's someone because you do need help down the middle. You have Zaka, you have Middlestat, you have Lindholm, and you have to wonder, is McTavish an upgrade over those guys? But he is much younger. So like there is that part of it too.
Yeah, he's a solid player and a guy that, again, has taken steps forward.
22.
I think a pretty big body, too, like 6'1", 6'2", I want to say.
6'1", 219.
Yeah, like, so, again, I wonder if he's more of like a 2C at the next level, as he kind of continues to round out his game. But you could use that. If all of a sudden in 5 years from now, you still have Pasternak, who's 32, and your two guys down the middle are Jake O'Brien and Mason McTavish, it's a pretty good investment, right? So, yeah, I think that's even a guy that I'd be more comfortable with also giving up like draft capital for if it means he's your second line center for the foreseeable future, as opposed to someone like Knies. Like, do I think Matthew Knies is a better player right now? Yeah, but I think in terms of positional need, you could see why a guy like I think McTavish would be really valued there. So I'm not saying the Bruins shouldn't dive into the offer sheet market. I think, as you saw last year with the Blues, when you can take advantage of it, you can add a really good player for what could be a good value or, a really good investment in a player. But it's about picking the right guys. And I wonder if it's kind of the same way as like Broberg and Holloway, where maybe underrated, slept on guys who are due for bigger roles. I wonder if that's the guys you target as opposed to the guy who's already breaking out, that his stock could get even higher, but you're going to be paying the price both in draft picks and money just to pluck that guy from a team that ideally wants to keep him.
I think that's the big thing. It's just getting in on it.
You're
early.
finding
and
the
Knies
next. It's the same thing with like the Sam Bennett thing, where it's like you don't want to sign Sam Bennett, you want to find the next Sam Bennett. Like,
yes,
you want to find those next guy that you look at, whether it's the underlying numbers, the early production, anything like that. You want to find that next guy that can take a step forward, which is why, like Matthew Knies is already almost a 30 goal scorer. Could Will Cooley be a 25 goal scorer next year while also logging 300 hits like he did this past year? Like, I wonder if that's the guy you take the chance on more, where especially you don't have to give up as much draft picks in order to bring him aboard.
That's the biggest thing. I don't want to give up a ton of draft picks. I'm not looking to give up a ton of draft picks. I think that is why I'm hesitant on the Matthew Knies thing. Connor, what can the people look forward to from you over the Globe and Boston.com?
Yeah, you can read all my stuff over at theglobeandboston.com. We've covered every step of the way this Bruins offseason, whether it's offer sheets, head coaching search, trades, free agency, all that stuff. So read all my stuff over at theglobeandboston.com. If you want to follow me on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Poke Bear listeners, have a great rest of your week.